And our next speaker this morning is Mark Pukita, another name I may have mispronounced. Oh, good. Mr. Pukita, again, you'll have 5 minutes. If you would share, please, what part of the state you're from, that's always helpful to the board. And
Sure.
we welcome
Sure.
you.
The last name is Pekita. It rhymes with the banana brand Chiquita, so Pekita, Chiquita. My nickname has been Banana since I was like that high. And sometimes other words were added to it in high school. My name is Mark Pekita, excuse me, and I live in Dublin. I'm here as a father and a grandfather, fed up with the arrogance, impotence, and timidity of all of you to not simply admit an error on your part, but instead debate a resolution to request a formal opinion of the Attorney General on your past equity resolution of July 2020. That 2020 equity resolution reads like a manifesto of a street mob. It has stoked division and ignores the real history of the state of Ohio. The current Attorney General resolution is a cop-out and inseparable from the equity resolution. The equity resolution starts with these words: as our nation grapples with the hard truths of racism and inequality. Imagine if you had started with the only race that should matter in Ohio K-12 education is the race to enable all children to reach full potential. Therein I expose your pandering and your racism. The children and grandchildren of Ohioans could care less about race. They have moved forward while you seek to pull them back. Later, you had this line: the State Board of Education believes that public schools are fundamental to our democratic society, and we must be dedicated to equity and thoughtful teaching of future citizens that racism, bigotry, and hatred have no place. I want to stress the use of the word democratic. First, we live in a republic. It might be nice as the leaders in education to get our form of government correct. How about uniting with words like this? The State Board of Education believes that every school in Ohio must be committed to enabling all Ohio children, regardless of race, sex, socioeconomic status, disability, or faith, to reach their full educational potential and in an environment devoid of bigotry and bias. In your hateful resolution, you took time to refer directly to a white supremacy culture. I'm white, and while I can find a few narrow-minded individuals and bigots of all races, I do not know where this white supremacy culture resides. All the whites I know abhor bigotry. They abhor racism. They are part of an honorable Ohio, an Ohio that has a tradition of being at the forefront of equality. Let's talk about a few facts. Over 300,000 Ohioans fought in the Civil War. Over 11,000 gave their lives. Ohioan Ulysses S. Grant single-handedly saved the Union in our most important moment of truth. A white Ohioan proved that we could, do, and will live up to our founding principles. Not just that all men are created equal, but that Americans always strive to be a more perfect union. That is not a black, brown, or a white struggle, it's an American struggle. But also, what about the Underground Railroad, whose northern trunk line was Ohio? Part of a culture in Ohio that has been there when it was needed. Let me be clear. George Floyd should never have died, but he was not engaged in noble activity when he did. He was committing a crime. What of the 11,000 Ohioans who died in a noble cause, the Civil War? Did you forget them as you pandered in your equity resolution? Your equity resolution is horribly drafted, inept on history, poorly vetted, and repeatedly racist in its dog whistle for the left language. It looks for a scapegoat while ignoring that family composition, home environment, education of parents, and income levels are more determinative of outcomes than race by at least 100 times. Your equity resolution misdiagnoses the fundamental and actionable issues in favor of pandering and scapegoating. What really has more impact? White supremacy, racism, and implicit bias? Or parents, whatever their race, who have not prepared?
Mr. Pekita, you've reached the 5-minute mark. I'm going to ask you to offer your concluding thought.
My concluding thought is, who will make a motion under your emergency rule 9B to do away with resolution 20? Who will make a second? This can't wait. We the people need to see where you and Governor Mike DeWine stand on the record today. And if you do not act in a serious way versus your Dave Yost comedy resolution, we will know your answer.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions for this speaker? Ms. Johnson?
Your mic's on, Diana.
Thank you for being here today.
You're welcome.
I am very proud of Resolution 20, as you call it. I just wanted to make that statement. I was trying to follow along on your testimony, and we have 3 different pages, so I couldn't find the statement I was looking for. But you said something about children and someone could care less about race, or something like that. Could you repeat that sentence? Children and, I'm sorry, I'm not repeating it, but I know you said could care less about race, and I wanted to see if you could repeat that sentence.
I said that kids and grandkids of Ohioans could care less about race. They have moved forward while we seek to pull them back.
That's the statement. How do you know that?
I'm 62 years old, and I'm active in the community.
But my community, the people in my community care a lot about race because they are discriminated against because of their race.
How are they discriminated against?
You really want the list?
I do
Okay.
want the list. Yeah.
Redlining, their communities.
Redlining's been gone
excuse me.
since the 70s.
You asked me a question. I'm going to answer your question, so please don't interrupt me, okay?
Okay.
Redlining, meaning that banks were able to draw lines around certain communities in which they chose not to present loans to them. And if you drive through Cleveland, you can see a number of those red line communities now because the people who live there have not been able to come out of those communities because they're not able to get the kind of funding they need to improve their quality of life. School segregation, discrimination, where we have some communities because of property taxes, which in itself was a racist way of funding schools. Students are not able to get the kind of resources they want. We have mass incarceration, in which we had different laws provided for white people who were using cocaine, who used it basically the same as black people, but black people got much longer prison sentences than white people. We talk about the GI Bill, on how the GI Bill was very selectively provided for white people and was not provided for black people in the same way. We talk about health disparities, in which people who go into hospitals are black people are not treated in the same professional manner in many cases as white people, and the list goes on and on. So when you make a statement like kids and children or whatever could care less about race, I understand that may be true in your experiences as a 62-year-old man, but in my experience, it's not true. So that's why I was challenging you on that statement.
You do realize that you can't come up with any data on anything you just listed. Redlining has been illegal since like the 1980s. Okay, and the incarcerations that you talk about, they're not factual. Most of the people that are in jail for long sentences were pled down from more significant trafficking sentences. I understand this data. I've been studying it for like 5 years, and you're smiling smugly over there, but you don't have any factual data on any of those topics. I would challenge you to send me that list. I'll send you my data, and you send me yours.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember your name, Mr.
Pekita.
Pekita, yes. I'm not going to send you the data because it's really available if you just Google it.
That's the answer from everybody that has no data.
I'm not going to take the time to do that, but I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Just one final response to that. The
Sir,
public school
sir,
review.
Sir, thank you. 1 second, we have another question from a board member. The way this format works, board members ask questions and you answer them.
Madam President, if they make a contention, I'm not allowed to respond.
You had an opportunity to respond, and Ms. Johnson then concluded her remarks. I'm going to turn to Dr. Collins.
Thank you. I just have a couple of statements. First, I want to say to Board Member Johnson, there's been a lot recently about the responsibility felt by Black people to have to sit in rooms filled with white people and defend an entire race and to have to wear that on their shoulders. And I feel like the discussion that just occurred and the rudeness with which Member Johnson was addressed it shows exactly that Black responsibility that population is feeling according to research. That being said, throughout your testimony, you comment on left agendas and right agendas and conservatives and lots of statements about the politicization of education. I just want to say data is not left or right. And our educational data in Ohio tells us that there is extreme gaps between Black students specifically and all other groups of students. We see the gap slowly closing. We've been working hard on that. But this resolution, you mentioned another point here. You mentioned parents and the parents' role in education. We, as a Board of Education and educators as a whole, can only control what happens within the bounds of the school building. That's it. We can't control parents, and our resolutions can't control parents. But what we can do is make suggestions to districts and schools to be more intentional about what they're doing, to look for instances of bias in their curriculum, and to just pay attention. And that is what that resolution asks school districts to do. That being said, we are a local control state. So that resolution may be a guiding document put out by the board before me, before my time, but local districts are in control of what they choose to do at the local level. So we have to take together all these pieces here. What's within our bounds of control? What does the data tell us? And what should we be doing to help move education forward? And I'm sorry, again, data is not left or right. Data just is. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
I agree with you that data just is. And another one of your board members doesn't want to share data with me so we can have a discussion on that topic.
All right, we're going to request civility and
how have I been uncivil?
and seek understanding. And I'm moving on here to Mr. Larue. Oh, sorry.
Well, I haven't had to.
I'm on. Okay. Fantastic. I appreciate you coming out today. I am a history major, and I love talking history, and I love the fact you brought up the Civil War. I wish as a society or whatever, we can celebrate both the contributions of black and white Civil War soldiers. You probably know 5,092 black Ohioans served in the Civil War. In
Absolutely.
fact, there were 4 Medal of Honor recipients. The most of any Civil War regiment was the 5th, which was a regiment from Ohio. And I love the fact you bring up President Grant. Okay. I also like the fact when we talk about the Underground Railroad, that was a partnership of black and white conductors. You're probably familiar with John Rankin in Ripley. You may or may not be familiar also that there were black conductors who brought folks across the river. John Parker probably being the most famous. If you ever go to Ripley, you should go to the John Parker House on the river and then go to the John Rankin House on the hill. I struggle as a former history teacher that we can't celebrate the victories and the success. That's not to say we need to ignore things, but we need to talk about. We always talk about it's one or the other. What you're talking about, and I mean, again, I appreciate you bringing up the Civil War. I talk all day about the Civil War. I generally don't talk a lot in these meetings, but I'll talk all day about this. But we need to find the ability to celebrate the successes that are part of both our black and white communities, as well as things that we need to work on. So anyhow, I appreciate what you're doing. I just wish when we talked about these things, we talk about the black and white Underground Railroad conductors and the black and white Ohioans who made the ultimate sacrifice in war. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hagan?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Pekita, I would make a few suggestions in your presentation. Coming in with the guns a-blazing and attacking everyone in the room is kind of a dumb approach, okay? I know you're running for office, and I imagine that you probably think that you can use this as something to benefit your race. But let me suggest that, first of all, there are several members in this room that didn't vote for the resolution that you talked about. There are also several members in the room that will support my resolution, which you have condemned, to send this to the Attorney General for analysis. I know you apparently think you're the smartest man in the room, and that's your prerogative. But let me just suggest that a little humility would be in order, in that your civil issue here with the way you've approached this is rightfully pointed out. So although I agree with a lot of what you had to say, I would suggest that you may want to refine your approach and also realize that people that are on your side don't need to be attacked, and that usually doesn't do anything for your overall picture. So thank you for being here. Thank you for some of your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Hagan. Let me just make one comment about going to the Attorney General. Do you not think that just by the fact you have to take this to the Attorney General, that it's flawed?
Yes, would you like to respond, Mr. Hagan? Please go ahead.
And that is why I'm doing that. If you've read my resolution, you're aware that the Attorney General and 19 other states' Attorney General have sent a letter to the Federal Department of Education in reference to some of the very similar grant push that's coming down to the states from the current administration. They are declaring in their letter that they believe it to be illegal both in state law and federal law, and I agree. And so that being said, our Attorney General being a signer on that letter, it's a no-brainer that he should be looking at what this board passed a year ago and pointing out if it's not legal so that it can be addressed.
Why not just use the emergency powers of the board? And
you need to take a look at the board before you make these assumptions. There's no advantage to putting resolutions forward that fail So there are logical steps to take to get things done, and sometimes the bull in the china shop is not the right approach.
So are you suggesting I'm the bull in the china shop?
I definitely would classify you as a bull in the china shop, yes.
I think that there are two types of anger. Biblically, there's righteous anger and there's rage. Rage is wishing for ill will on someone or some society. That's not what I have here. I've got 2 grandchildren. I've got 4 grandnephews. And I believe that their future is in peril, as is the peril, as is the future of every child, not only in Ohio, but this nation, because of thinking like what was in that resolution. So you may not like my style, but I think that there are people who are afraid of being canceled. There are people who are afraid of having their children bullied. I'm fortunate to be in the place where I can't be canceled because there's nothing to cancel. And I'm pretty much a nobody. So I'm standing up for those people that can't do it.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to allow Mr. Hagan to have a response. We are over the 10-minute mark, so this will be the end of the discussion. Oops, let me try.
Well, I cannot do you on the grandchildren. I've got 11.
Wow. God bless you and them.
Four children. Yes, for our political views, my children and grandchildren have been victimized by systems. That is the norm. That's, fighters put up with that. We deal with that because we want to have, our view heard. And, when you think you're right, you're willing to fight for what is right. And that's what I have always done. I've never been concerned about being canceled, and I don't think there's anyone in the room other than you, maybe, that would think that. So I just want you to understand that tone it down. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Madam President.
Our next speaker